Okay, I'm Mark, and I'm Mark Koziol, the curator at the New York State Military Museum. Today is Monday, August 27th, 2018. It's 11 o'clock, and we have here Robert Lee Whitman. And Mr. Whitman, if you would give us your full address currently.
Okay, 4437 Cedar Bush Road, Gloucester, Virginia, 23072.
Okay, very good. And what branch of the military were you in?
Army.
Army, okay. Were you in the New York region when you signed up for the military?
Yes, I lived in Schenectady and I joined the New York Guard
Okay, very good. When did you join the Guard?
around 1947.
Okay, very good. And you stayed in the military until when?
Actually, 84 I was off active duty, but 89 is when I got a full retirement.
Okay, very good. You were in the Korean War, right?
Yes.
Okay. What unit were you in when you were in Korea?
I wasn't in Korea.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It was because of the unit I was in.
Okay.
Okay.
During that time
During
period.
the Korean War, I mean, I went through OCS and all like that, but the unit that I wound up in were between the 3rd Armored Division, 1st Armored Division. I was in a battalion in the 1st Armored Division. I'm trying to remember the number right now, but I had the only recon platoon there. But then the unit that I was primarily in was the 9th Cavalry Regiment. The 9th and 10th Cavalry Regiments were the 2 black cavalry regiments in the United States Army. Truman integrated them. When he integrated them, he transferred everybody out and put all new people in. I was the 14th guy assigned to the 9th Cav at that time. And I became a Buffalo soldier.
Very good.
Now, if you're not familiar with why the name, the blacks kept their hair close cropped, and they had a reasonably close cropped black hair, which strongly resembled the coat of the buffalo. So the Indians called them Buffalo soldiers.
Okay.
And I became full-fledged Buffalo soldier.
How long how long were you in the 9th Cavalry Regiment?
Well, I was with 9th Cavalry Regiment a little over a year, and what happened was we were continuously on orders to Vietnam with only 14 people, and we started getting people. That was fine. The trouble was we didn't have any operationals. Our tanks were worn out. We had a complete new contingent of tanks coming to the unit. I never saw them. You know, we never got them, and to this day I don't know where they went.
Okay.
But in the meantime, everybody in Korea say, "Where are you? We want you." And we were on first line battle reports and the whole 9 yards. We knew where we were going to go. We knew what targets we would have and the whole works. Because we would have been, shall we say, the guys that they cranked up, and all of a sudden they need a whole bunch of firepower and tanks, and we'd go in to do it. You know what I mean? In other words, we wouldn't be part of a division or anything else like that. We'd be corps level troops that could support women where needed in a hurry.
So during the war, you were stationed in South Korea, or you were stateside?
No, I never got to Korea.
I'm sorry. Okay, so you were stateside, right?
Well, I was on orders for Korea as an individual 7 times,
Okay.
but I was still in the unit, and the unit was going, and that took priority. So as a result, I didn't go. An interesting aspect of that thing is when I went through OCS, we were all tankers. It was armor OCS. There were only 2 of us that actually got assignments that were armor assignments of the class. Everybody else went to Korea as a forward observer. At that time in the Army, the Air Force didn't have their air control guys down there with the units like they do today. And we had to be capable of forward observe, bring the artillery in the whole 9 yards, and bring the airstrikes in, everything. In any case, everybody in the OCS class went over and became FO. Two of us, one of us went down to Fort Carson and got into a tank unit. I went to, wrong. Down to Texas. Oh my God. What's the name of the fort in Texas?
Fort Bliss?
Fort Hood? Fort Hood, yes.
Oh,
I went to Hood.
okay.
And that's why I went in the first Army Division there. But then they screened everybody out of the 9th Cad, and I was one of the relatively new lieutenants, and they said, Bob, guess what? We'll see you. And I went up and I was in the cab, which worked out great. But it was one of those things that kept me out of Korea, which did not make me happy at the time. It showed you I was young and foolish. But overall, it worked out good.
Very good.
Oh, by the way, I was the S4 for the whole regiment.
And what is S4? Just
S4 is your logistics officer.
Oh, right. Okay. Very good.
You know,
What were some of the duties that you would perform when you were in
I
S4?
was responsible for all the tanks coming in, and that we had physically ordered all the spares and so forth. With the tanks come with what they call on-vehicle material. So every tank you get, if it has machine guns on it, those come with the tank. Anything that would be with the tank comes with it. But spare parts and things like that don't come with the tank. Well, we knew what tanks we were getting, so we had ordered everything that would go with the tanks, and we were getting that, but we didn't get the tanks. We had a battalion title, it was a heavy tank battalion, but we were really a regiment. For example, we had our own aviation section. Everybody else didn't get that. Our radios can communicate with everybody. In other words, we could talk to the guys upstairs in the airplane. We could talk to anybody that would be out there with us, artillery, armor, infantry, you name it. In other words, we communicated with everybody. We would have been very handy later on in a thing like Grenada, where the Navy, Army, and Air Force went in and they couldn't talk to each other because everything was on the wrong frequencies.
Excuse me. So tell me something about your combat experience. Where were you first under fire, and what were some of your feelings?
Combat experience was all in China, all in Vietnam.
Okay.
Okay. I've got to tell you about my first unit in Vietnam.
Sure.
I went over to Vietnam as an individual. All right. I was a tanker. They didn't have a big need for tankers, and the way the replacement system works, you can be on orders for this unit, but if they need you someplace else at a higher priority, you don't get to that unit. So I never got to an armored unit in Vietnam. What happened was there were two of us, a fellow named Thompson and me, that were en route to Vietnam, and we got hauled up to the Department of the Army, and we had a 3-star general brief us, and he was the chief of support services for the United States Army, which included the functions we were going to get. What happened in the Army, you had a concurrent return program where the bodies of deceased personnel for all the services weren't just buried like they were in previous wars or anything like that. They were processed in country whereby they got embalmed, and bodies were looked at from the standpoint of wound data and autopsies and things like that. And the bodies went home to the undertaker who was closest to the selected and that was closest to the next of kin. And then he would do the final preparation on the body and bury it and all like that. personal effects were handled by a personal effects depot. In Vietnam, it was very easy to acquire things, like buy Seiko watches and other things of that nature. So if a guy was in Vietnam, say 5 or 6 months, the chances are excellent that he would have things that he would have gotten on the economy and so forth. So as a result, they had personal effects, which got very interesting, by the way. At any rate, to make a long story short, I got the personal effects depot because our congressionals on personal effects that never got home would stack 5 or 6 feet laying flat on the floor. And so we played games with those. That's what we did. A couple of examples. We had a young guy who I would have resurrected from the dead. Unfortunately, he didn't come back. He owned an elephant. And the family wanted the elephant. Now, it wasn't a big elephant. You don't have big elephants in Vietnam. They're not like African elephants, but it was big enough. And we were obliged to ship the elephant home. You can't imagine what it takes to ship an elephant home. You got to get elephant shots. You got to get people that will take it. You can't necessarily put him on an airplane. All little things like that. So, considering all the problems involved, and plus what's the family going to do with the elephant anyway, I went out to the unit and I brought several cases of beer with me as a peace offering. And we discussed the problem and wrote a letter up and had everybody in the unit sign it, which we sent to the next of kin, explaining how the elephant was really the unit's good luck mascot. So they took the hint and donated the elephant to the unit. We gave the elephant a send-off. We patted him on the rear end. And then we wrote another letter to the unit, which cost me another 3 cases of beer, thanking them for it and so forth. But you got to remember, we had to screen the property and so forth. Individual would have a whole bunch of very nice pictures showing young ladies and the all together and so forth. Did you send those to his wife? No. But we had a case of that, and we got all these lovely pictures. The pictures looked like they were made in the home where the guy came from, because we had home pictures. We had his wife's pictures. It looked like the wife. It looked like the home. So we figured, oh, these are pictures of the wife. Excellent pictures. I hated the Polaroid land camera because the gals could do anything at any time with that. In any case, make a long story short, we said, well, these have to be her pictures, so we'll send them home. Because if we don't send them home, she's going to come back and say, where are my pictures? Great, so we send them home. We get a letter back from her. Did she say thank you? No, she said, where did you get my sister's picture? And that was the type thing you ran up to against, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Interesting story.
At any rate, my total guidance for the job, mind you, I listened while the 3-star talked, but I didn't have room for questions or anything. He just explained the whole thing. I have to use one bad word now. The word I'm going to use would be 4 letters, but I'll use crap instead. Whitman, get over there and straighten that crap out. That was my total guidance. And he was my ops officer all the while I was there. And I only answered to one individual in Vietnam, that was Westmoreland. And I would write letters for Westmoreland and all like that. But I didn't belong to anybody else in Vietnam. People wanted me to belong to them because of the assets that I had, in that I could send things home, and I was my own customs approval and so forth. So if somebody had something illicit they wanted to send home, if they could get me to package it and send it, it would go. That would be it, you know. Obviously, since I'm not sitting here personally, without any financial obligations at all and so forth, you know that I didn't send them home. Other things I didn't do too.
Interesting. So you were in Vietnam from December of '67 to July of 1969?
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Now,
and you were there during the Tet Offensive, correct?
Oh, yes. you asked me where the first combat time, that was the
Right.
first big combat time right there. Our personal effects depot supposedly was in a secure area. I had about 159 guys with me. There was a little AG unit with us that had about another 150. You know, we had about 300 people on what had been a French compound type thing. So we were living pretty good as far as that goes. Across from Rodnomus was a South Vietnamese ordnance compound, maintenance-wise and so forth. And there was a military intelligence unit just down the road from us. Well, Teta 68, we were completely cut off by an NVA regiment. And
Where were you based during the Tet Offensive? What?
at the personal effects depot.
Okay, but where in the
The
South
personal
Vietnamese
effects, that was
nation?
in Camp Red Ball.
Okay,
Okay, vicinity-wise,
Right.
we were in the vicinity of Tan Son Nhut, but we weren't tied in with Tan Son Nhut or anything like that. In other words,
okay,
I could drive into Saigon and Tan Son Nhut in about less than an hour. Because that's where the other mortuary was.
okay, right.
Okay, now, for, among other things, they also carried me against the mortuary. So I could be like deputy commander of the mortuary. If the mortuary commander took off for someplace, he was lieutenant colonel, I could go in and fill in for him and so forth.
Okay.
I've got to tell you an interesting true story, which you will like. The mortuary, what we did, they would have tours where you have VIPs come over to Vietnam. This would include congressmen and like that. In other words, they go to Vietnam and they're going to spend a few days. They are now authorities on the Vietnam War and they'll know all about it. They get taken various places. So we arranged for them to bring those VIPs to the mortuary. And we would have an office area where we welcomed them and so forth. And in the office area, we would have briefing charts. We would tell them what we did and how it functioned, and the concurrent return program and so forth. This was located right at Tan Son Nhut, at the Air Force. But we were part on the Air Force there, Air Force Base there. Okay. Parallel to us, in other words, we were on what would be called a city street, for want of a better put it. If you went through our back door, you walked right over to the next parallel street. That's where the Air Force Officers Club was. So the escorts would always come to us about 11:15, 11:30 in the morning, so that when we got done with our briefing, it would be time to go to lunch. So we'd say, you probably are going to go to lunch now. And they'd say, and the guy, escorts would say, oh yeah. I said, well, why don't you take them right over here to the Air Force Officers Club, because you can just walk through our back door and you're right there. You won't have to move the cars or anything. And that's your best lunch in Vietnam. Oh, and they'd go for that. What we didn't tell them is when you walked through our apparent back door, you were walking into our processing area, where all the bodies came in and so forth, with all the odors that went with it and everything. And the guys in the back room would have a body that was just on the other side of the door where they were doing the primary investigation, so he would be brand new and fresh from the battlefield. And we'd pick one that was messed up pretty good, especially from burns and things like that. And so you get them through the door, and you do the natural thing. Here's the young GI, and he's doing the identification. You'd say, "Oh, hi Charlie, how's it going with this one?" And he'd say, "Well, he got burned pretty bad, so I'm having little problems with the identification." And then we'd go in with spiel telling him what he was doing and what else we did and so forth. In the meantime, they are, shall we say, taken aback. They got to see the war, and now they don't like seeing the war. And then, of course, we do cute little things. Of course, I would one of the reasons that had me there to do that. I say, oh, this is Wednesday. The goulash is special at the club, so you'll fit right in on that. And we take them over to the club for lunch and eat very light lunches.
What was your rank during your time period in
Well,
Vietnam?
okay.
I'm sure it changed.
Okay, technically I was a major, but I was really a captain because with my moving around and people not knowing where I was still captain. It took them 2 years to make me a major beyond when I was selected for major. Now, let me put it this way. I'm still looking for back pay and things like that. No. No, they didn't see fit to say, oh, you should have been a major for 2 years.
Right.
By the way, I never had less than a captain's job, a major's job while I was a lieutenant. I might have had a captain's job with it, but I always had at least a major's job.
Did you receive any injuries or wounds while you were in Vietnam?
Well, I did, but I never went to the medics with them.
Okay.
Let me phrase it this way. You could get a Purple Heart for any sort of injury that occurred during a combat operation. If you got a scratch or something like that, well, the bulk of us, especially with me, because I was too busy, I'd throw a Band-Aid on or something. And, for what it's worth, over the time I was in Vietnam, I had 7 of those, and I never got a Purple Heart because I never bothered to go to medics.
Right. Okay.
One time, as a quick example, there was a warrant officer and I were standing there, and the primary thing we got shot at with while in the depot were mortars and sniper fire. We weren't big enough for them to fool with. They were going to come back and wipe us out. You know, but we weren't a military threat to the NBA or anybody else, or the NBA or
the Viet Cong.
Vietcong, right?
Right.
At any rate, make a long story short, that's where the mortar fire came in, and to this day we don't know what it was. But I had a warrant officer that was with me, and we were standing there just talking, and the mortar came in and went off between us, and he went through the air about 20 feet one way, and I went through the air about 20 feet in another direction. Neither one of us was physically marred or anything like that. No, we found out that we were capable of flight, but we couldn't hear for about 3 days. You know, and the VA didn't give me a disability for that either.
Okay.
The only disability I got in Vietnam relating to injuries and so forth is I have jungle rot on both feet and they can't cure it.
Okay. Right, the jungle environment is much different than what most Americans lived in when they went over
I was
serve.
every place in the jungle.
Sure.
My job, for what it's worth, my jobs involved travel all over. In other words, it was very, even when I had the personal ex depot, it wasn't uncommon for me to go out and get with the units. And when I got to Chain In, which is the next job that I had, I was the ops officer for the whole battalion that we had there. And I went all over the place for our various operations, because we didn't just operate in Chain In, we operated with them. We'd go out with, one of my pet peeves is I'd have guys out with infantry battalions and so forth. And they operated right with the infantry battalions, doing everything the guys did. Okay. My guys didn't get a CIB, everybody in the infantry battalion did. That combat infantry badge.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
What unit was that battalion?
That was
just
the
mentioned?
Chain-In Support Command, or sort of a title. They used the battalion headquarters for a title, but we supported major elements of the 25th Infantry Division, major elements from the 1st Cav Division, the Philippine Civic Action Group, which was an engineer group from the Philippines, a full division of Vietnamese Red Hats, that was their airborne guys that jumped and so forth. Any Air Force in the area, anybody else who came in with a base camp also, and anybody that was there, they got everything else. The only thing we did not do was medical. We had a post office, we had sentry dog platoon, we had our own arms depot, we had our own petroleum thing to include a tank farm, to include all of the things that you go out and operate in the field with units where you bring the bladders out and so forth. In other words, we can do the field operations, we can do the support operations and so forth. We did all of the support of operations for not only the Air Force, but especially the Army Aviation and so forth. We developed the first hot refueling rearming for the helicopters. And when the higher headquarters found out about it, about 6 months later, they took credit for it and got all commendations and so forth.
Now, what kind of refueling was that? Could you explain?
Well, okay, they'd fly in, and with a chopper, the nice part about a chopper is it's mobile. So you could bring it in, you could put all new rockets on it for, give them machine gun ammo if you included that. Or you could take them where you refuel them. Well, typically with the safety types being involved, they wanted you to shut it off and do this and do that. We never shut anything off. We do refueling like they would do at not Indy, but NASCAR tracks and so forth. We go up and fill it up and so forth. We did the same thing with the rockets. Where it got tricky is they decided they needed different rockets than we were going to put on because what they were going to shoot at changed. So we had to have more than one set of rockets available for them to put on and so forth. So we did the rearming that way and so forth. And this counted for anything that came in and so forth.
Okay.
And all like that. Now we also did things like, okay, you had a lot of base camps and they would have artillery at the base camp. 175s is the best example. A 175, you could fire a tube out on a 175 in a couple of weeks without any effort at all. All right. Now, the replacement part on the tubes was where it got tricky because you had to get the replacements to them. Now, you could do that one of two ways. You could go down the road and haul the replacement tubes to them. That wasn't too healthy in our environment because anything off the base camp, we didn't know it. And so forth. So we figured out a way to rig them where you could put them under the hooks. The big helicopters that came in looked like a big bug that would come down over the load and so forth. So we kept them on their wooden frame that they came in, and we figured out how to hook up the wooden frame so you could pick them up with that. And what we did is we made A-frames and put them out at where the artillery units were. And their artillery would be on tracks. So they could go under the A-frame, hook onto their present tube, pick the tube up, all right, and then drive out from under. And then they could drop the tube, then they could reposition. Well, we would bring the new tube in and drop it, and they reposition it over the tube, and then they just hoist the new tube up and they could mount it on their track, and so forth. Now, you would think they'd want us to bring the tubes back. No, the only thing we had to bring back was the brass rails on the tubes. Water-Bleed Arsenal was the source of the tubes, and they couldn't get the brass for the rails, so we'd send the rails back home.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And that was the big criteria, be sure and get the rails off.
Exactly. what were your impressions of Vietnam, the environment, let's say?
Oh,
Was it different from what you
well, it was hot and wet,
experienced?
and dry and wet.
Right, they have two different rainy seasons, right, that last a long time.
No, what you don't see in the movies,
Hmm.
is that you see in the movies everybody running around in ponchos, all like that.
Why would they not wear the ponchos?
Why bother? It rains and it stops. You dry off in 20 minutes.
Okay.
And, well, let me put it this way. Since we did everything at Canaan, you know what I mean? We were supporting Allied, we were supporting Joint, the whole 9 yards. That's how I made Colonel. Because what happened is, the requirement to be a logistics officer, which required full colonel rank, you had to have done Allied operations, you had to have done combined operations. You know, one is with other people, one is with our own units. You know, one is with Air Force and Navy and so forth. The other one is with, like, other forces.
Like
Okay.
the South Vietnamese
Sure,
forces.
Koreans and so forth.
Right.
Yeah, so I was doing both for combat.
Okay.
Okay. In addition to that, I was doing it at all logistics levels right across the board. So you name it, I did it. Plus, I was doing it in an environment where you modified what you were doing all the time. Like I say, we modified the way we refueled, we modified the way we do. And the higher headquarters took credit for all that stuff. We didn't. And
How were your, how well did you and your unit work with the South Vietnamese, both
Well,
the military units or the civilians?
well,
Or did you have a lot of interaction with the
the
civilians?
The military units, we were supporting the military units, but we weren't actually doing the operations with them. But I think we would have got along all right with them. The problem with the military units was that our headquarters, I don't mean our local headquarters per se, I'm talking about the great ones way up in the sky and especially the State Department, never recognized who the Vietnamese military were. You see, you had Saigon and you had the South Vietnamese Army, right?
Right.
You know who was the prime military unit in our area? That was the Caudais. The Caudais were the ones that ran the province. They were the province chiefs and also the big religion for the province and the whole 9 yards. The province chiefs ran Vietnam from a military standpoint. They each had their own army. They had the popular forces, support forces. When we put advisors in Vietnam, they would be without popular forces, support forces, because that's where they were, at the provinces, individually. Our guys that were with them were supposed to be supported by the Vietnamese. I took it upon myself to go out and make sure they had what they needed. I'd bring steaks out to them and everything else. So I'd go out and get with them. We could watch the Ho Chi Minh Trail from where we were at St. In. It was a scenic scene. You get up on the tower and they bring up stuff down.
Okay.
Now, from the standpoint of the South Vietnamese forces, their artillery guys were very inefficient. In other words, we were supposed to be shooting on a band like this, all right? The Ho Chi Minh Trail was over here. For some reason, their guns would get where the next thing you know, they're shooting off to the left and the rounds are landing on the guys on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. So we would advise them about that because that wasn't where they're supposed to be shooting. And normally within a couple hours, they'd stop shooting at the enemy on the Ho Chi Minh Trail and get back to where they could shoot at other things and so forth.
Were they using American
We
artillery?
provided the weapons and everything, you know, all
Okay.
the ammunition. Sure, we provided all the ammunition and everything.
Okay.
Yeah, we had our own ammo dump, remember?
Right.
Now, you might, a quick aside on the ammo dump. Gloria likes this when I tell you. We didn't own the ammo dump. The ammo dump was the home of a Panther. that was his home. He lived there, and nobody screwed with the Panther, believe me.
I bet. Interesting. Let's see. Any other stories you want to tell us about Vietnam? About the
God.
weaponry?
Well, first of all, I got rid of my M16. If you got it dirty, it didn't work.
Okay.
And I carried an M2 carbine because the South Vietnamese we supported also had M2 carbine, so I had all sorts of ammunition for that. The major that came in and eventually took over my job, he got rid of his too, and he carried a 45 caliber submachine gun, you know. And he loved it. He liked his much better. The guys that I had there at came in had a tendency to acquire AKs, AK-47, and they'd use those.
Those were
We had a South Vietnamese 51 caliber machine gun, which was designed for anti-aircraft and so forth primarily. But we had that, and we could use our machine in that 51 caliber. We couldn't use the 51 caliber ammo in our 50 caliber, but they designed theirs so it would use our ammo, but and so forth. And we had that as part of our defenses. We got artillery pieces, which we use for our own defenses. And you got to remember, a good number of the guys that you had in support roles, like the guys that I had throughout the battalion, would have come from combat forces where they got wounded or something, where they couldn't be kept in the combat unit, but they worked in our unit. But they were artillerymen and so forth, and they knew how to do all that. So we had artillery pieces that we put on a perimeter, which we used flechette rounds. And flechette rounds with all your little darts that came out like a super duper shotgun, and you could take all the foliage, you can take the woods down, you can take people down, anything. Let me put it this way, if somebody were coming at you, it got to be very discouraging. Now, one of the things that happened from an operational standpoint, somebody in the Army found out that everybody hadn't gone to Vietnam. So, I was over one tour and well into the second tour. A good share of the guys were there on 2 tours, some even on 3 tours and so forth. You had other people in the Army that hadn't been there at all. So they said, we got to start sending those people. So this was early '69. The problem was they had rank. So if you got an NCO, you got him as an E6, maybe even E5 at least, or maybe an E6 or E7, which meant he'd be put into a supervisory type position. Okay, great. But he thinks stateside. He wants to impose stateside rules, stateside reports, and like that. And you didn't operate that way. That wasn't the way you lived. You know what I mean? And this was both officers and enlisted. In other words, you didn't get a captain or lieutenant. You got a major, maybe even a lieutenant colonel. We got a new lieutenant colonel in that replaced the one that we had, who was very savvy as to how things worked. And my job as an ops officer was to let him think he was fighting the war and keep him out of fighting the war because he got people killed until we educated him and so forth. For example, we had frequent ruckuses. Let me explain it to you. The Ho Chi Minh Trail came right down by us. When they got to Tay Ninh, they turned left. And by turning left, they went down through the Parrots Beach area and provided support to anybody down there, down into the Tan Son Nhut area and so forth, which was their function to bring the thing down there. If anything they had left over when they were going back home, again, they went back up the trail. But they'd shoot at us then, that's when we got attacked.
Okay.
So we never knew when we were going to get to do that.
And what was the name of the area or town? You said Canaan?
Canaan.
Oh, would you spell it for us?
T-A-Y-K-N-I-N-H.
Okay. I'm sure we could find it on a map.
Yeah.
I just want to get it down on the...
Yeah, Canaan was a province.
Oh, okay. It was a
Yeah.
province. Thank you.
Yeah. The Cowdies were the ones that were in charge. Cowdies were a religion where they had, they addressed all three major Indian religions, you might say, all of your Christian religion, or your, well,
Buddhism?
Buddhism and like that. Incidentally, Buddhism is not a religion, it's teaching. Buddha was a real guy. Now, if you go to Thailand, you've got Buddhas all over the place, and you've got your Buddhist statues all over, and the statues each reflect Buddha in one of his, Buddha sleeping, or Buddha as he was contemplating something or other, or what have you, what he was doing at the time. And from that, it reflected his teaching. And Confucius was the same way. That's not a religion either. Everybody thinks it is, but it isn't. You can be a Roman Catholic and be a Buddhist.
Okay.
Roman Catholic won't like, church won't like it, but Buddhists don't give a damn, you know.
Did you receive any decorations or medals and commendations during your Vietnam service?
Oh yeah, I got a couple of, I got a Bronze Star, I got a couple of Archons, I got a B on the one Archon. That was because of 1068. And I got 2 or 3, well, that was it, Army Commendation Medals and so forth. And then campaigns, I had 7 campaign ribbons from there. All the standard things that all the guys got. I didn't get a Purple Heart, as I mentioned to you. Some of the offshoot things that you might like. We were at the tail end of the supply chain, because we were right next to Cambodia. You couldn't go any further legally. I went with the Special Forces into Cambodia, but that wasn't recognized either. We weren't in Cambodia officially until '72.
Right. I think LBJ had missions go over the border into Cambodia or Laos when he was president, if I remember.
Oh yeah, they did. That
Some of my readings. Yeah.
Well, the CIA wasn't allowed. They ran their Air America airline into there because a friend of mine was on that. He went in the Air Force, and the next thing he knew, he was in civilian clothes, no identification. He's flying cargo airliners into Cambodia, into Laos rather.
So they were flying in American supplies and men into Laos and Cambodia?
They weren't flying a lot of men, but they'd fly some people, yeah, would get with the Laotians as special forces or something like that.
Right, okay.
But it wasn't, it was equipment with supplies and so forth to support them. They were supporting the Laotians because they were fighting for them. And like, for example, I had operations up at, all over the place. I had elements that operated up at Song Bay. No, I guess it was Song Bay. I thought I was home. I thought it was the Adirondack Mountains. That's just what the terrain looked like and so forth. And the little guys.
The mountain yards?
No, the natives that were there were the...
Okay.
I should have written it down on someplace. What are the natives there? Well, but they were our buddies and so forth. They were very small people.
Mountain yards.
Mountain yards, yes.
Oh, it is mountain yards.
It was mountain yards, yes.
Okay, right.
And so forth. So we got with the mountain yards there and
Oh, sure.
helped with them and tried to give them stuff and so forth. And
Were they good
No,
fighters?
contrary to popular belief, anybody that was shooting at bad guys, as far as I was concerned, was a recipient of anything we had that they could use effectively. Because first of all, they were between me and them bad guys, so I didn't think that was bad. Secondly, they couldn't operate effectively unless you gave them stuff, and so forth. And I'll give you a perfect example how the hierarchy sometimes operated. The last couple months I was in country, they brought me down to the headquarters down in Longman, where the 29th support general GS group, general support group, was that everybody operated under that.
Okay.
And they had all the guys in the depot that handled various types of supplies and so forth. So I'm down there, and what I did while I was there was write a standing operating procedure for supply and support units, which they wrote up and distributed as a recommended SOP throughout Vietnam, and it was accepted and operated on in Vietnam. And I got that much credit for it, zero. My bosses got credit for it, they got awards for it.
That's too bad, right?
That was a story of my life.
Yeah. Are there any funny stories
Well,
in the Vietnam time period?
Well, I can give you both.
Sure. Yeah, give us a couple stories. You already told us about the elephant.
I'll give you a serious story first.
Sure.
I'll give you two serious stories first. The first story was, while I'm doing that, I'm wandering through the headquarters, and here is a guy who is handling all of the things that would involve race registration and things like that. And here's a guy from First Cav, and they had a unit that they lost, where they lost people, and it was up in the Paris Beak area. Paris Beak, it was called that because the way that the configuration on the terrain, it looks like a parrot beak. And Charlie owned that. We didn't, they did. And anyway, they lost people up there, and he wanted us to come up with grave registration troops, go in and recover the bodies. And I heard enough of the conversation, and I said, "You want us to do what?" And I said, "Have you been there?" "Oh, no, I operate over here, I don't go there." I said, "And you want us to go there?" "Uh-huh." I said, "Okay." I said, I'm going to act for the headquarters right now. We want two things to happen. We want a minimum of a company of combat troops with us. We will make one trip into the area and one trip out. We will not go in one way and come back the same way. Your company will be with us for security. You will also be with the company where you get to go with us." "Whoa, why do you want that? All that?" I said, "Because I want to come back alive." I said, "I'll go with you." "Well, what do you know about it?" I said, "I just spent the better part of a year doing that for a living. I don't have to worry about it. I've been there."
So did the officer go with you to
No,
retrieve the bodies?
they decided differently.
I
They
see.
decided they didn't want to do that. But on the fun part, what we did is we stationed a good sharp lieutenant down in the depot. And the depot was armed with three things: 2 cans of spray paint and a decal. Okay? If he found something that we needed that we could use, he would take the 1 can of spray paint and spray over the UIC on a unit identification code. That's where it was going. Then he'd hold our decal up, and he'd go and put the decal of our unit on. Find a guy with a forklift, those Vietnamese that operated the forklifts, and say, "Stage that for shipment to St. In, because that's where it goes." He would, and that's how we would get it.
Interesting.
You know, and then, well, what else was I going to tell you?
the ice cream.
Oh, yes, up at St. Anne.
Okay.
Somebody shipped us a ice cream truck, and a reefer truck, okay? Now, you gotta remember, we didn't have the generator horsepower to can freeze, or the freezers for that matter, to keep ice cream. So when we got it, we made a forced issue of ice cream to everybody that was on the whole base camp at the time, and we still didn't empty the damn thing. So what are we gonna do? Well, the troops said, hey, we know what to do with the ice cream. So we said, what? I'm one of the ones that said, what? I said, take it over to the Cowdies, they've got the orphanage there. I said, that's a great idea. So they did. They cranked the truck up, got a couple of gun jeeps, went off the post through enemy country, and I mean, it was pure enemy country from there to where the Cowdies had the orphanage, and got the ice cream to the kids. Now, either the VC figured out that everybody's going to get ice cream, and they thought that was a good idea, or what, but they didn't bother us, fortunately. So we got there, and that's when they had the big problem. The kids had never seen ice cream. And the equivalent of nuns and so forth that were there with the kids finally got a couple to try the ice cream. That opened the floodgates. And the ice cream went zip.
So you were able to give it all away quickly to the kids.
Yeah, you could send a reefer back, you know, the truck back. Now the other thing they did, you'll like this. This reflects on the experience of some of your GIs. How's that? They sent us, for some reason, all sorts of plumbing gear. I mean, sinks and toilets, which didn't make any difference, but sinks and piping, and things that we could use to set up sinks and so forth, to wash your hands and shave, and piping where you'd have running water coming in from what did we use it for piping. We went to the Air Force and we got used wing tanks from them. And we flush the wing tanks out. We go to the engineers and we get the lumber and we make big A-frames for them, paint the wing tanks black and put them up there. And then with our water trucks, we could pump and fill the wing tanks up, and then run the lines down to where we put all the sink stuff and so forth. All right, and I had several lieutenants that worked with me, and they're observing this. And the first sergeant and I from the headquarters, from the company that I had, also yet still at the same time. I'm the ops officer and the company commander at the same time. We didn't have that many officers. At any rate, well, the nice part was I could write the thing as the ops officer and then implement it as the company commander. That's how I handled my drug problems too. At any rate, the lieutenants were observing this and they went over. Now remember, the water got warm in the tanks. We painted them black. And they're in the sunshine. So all of a sudden they got warm water to shave with. All the troops did, you know. Wow, how'd you do that? I'm going, oh, give me strength. First sergeant looked at me, I looked at him, and I got very profound. And I said, water runs downhill. Because we had water pressure and everything on it, you know.
That's great.
Well, we had.
We're going to have to stop in a few minutes. We got about 8 minutes of tape left, but go ahead. If
Okay.
you got a short story, go ahead.
Okay, well, this is a quickie.
Yeah.
Among other units, we had a bakery. And our bakery was down in Kuchi, which was where the 25th Division had their headquarters and so forth. And our bakery operated great because we provided bread for everybody. Aha! I'd had experience with bakeries before, So I went down and got the bakery where they could get the ingredients, and they made pizza for people too.
That's great.
But with the bakery, fortunately, we supported everybody so we could get support from everybody. We got with the engineers and we designed the bakery so the floors did this, and all we had to do to clean all that extra flour and everything out was go in and take water, wash it down, and ran out every day. And so you had a very sanitary bakery operation and all like that.
Very good. All right, we're going to stop this tape. Go ahead.
Okay, while I was at St. N with the bakery unit under us as part of the operation, because we had bakery, we had laundry, we had all the supplies, we had grade registration, general support, direct support, maintenance. We had our own maintenance units. In other words, we had all of this under there and so forth. In any case, in other words, I was very flexible as to where somebody could be assigned and so forth. And I had this troop who kept getting Article 15s for running off. Finally, he broke down enough to tell me the reason he was running off is he'd go down to Cu Chi, where he had a girlfriend, Vietnamese girlfriend. So I said, okay, if I put you at Cu Chi, are you going to behave? He said, oh, yeah. So I transferred him to the laundry at Cu Chi. And so forth. Well, the thing with the typewriter, what I was referring to a minute ago, is we had a unit with the, we had a contact team with the 11th Armored Cav Regiment, and they were down by the, rubber plantation, big rubber company.
DuPont.
Yeah.
DuPont
Right.
Company?
Yes,
Okay.
and so forth. So at any rate, what happened was the warrant officer ran the contact team. The warrant officer de-roast. He went home and a new warrant officer came in. And he was from this bunch that I was telling you about where they hadn't had any experience and so forth. And so he came over and the guys immediately telling more stories. They had him scared half to death. So that night, what happened is one guy went out and played Charlie coming in off the perimeter. And the warrant officer sitting there with his M16 on full automatic and put about 7 rounds into the guy coming in. That was the end of the guy. So they needed a disinterested officer to take depositions and so forth so they could resolve the whole thing. So they got me. And not only was I disinterested, but my couth level was non-existent, so they figured I'd be good for that. So at any rate, they got me and they sent me down there. So I stopped by the headquarters, and they had a legal section there. And in the legal section, you had young guys that, some of them were full-fledged lawyers, which is what I wanted, who had come in to the Army just as a draftee rather than try to be a lawyer because he'd have to spend more time as a lawyer and so forth. So I got one, and I'm going to take him with me up to the 11th ACR. Great. So he says, what do I need? I said, well, we need a typewriter because you have to take a deposition. So you need a mechanical typewriter. And take your camera. You might have things you can take pictures of. Okay. So we go up. Great. So we get there, and we're at the contact team. And of course, the guys are telling them all the war stories. And I went along with it. And I'm taking depositions about what had happened with the warrant officer and like that. Well, we weren't done, and it's the end of the day. So I said to him, he says, well, what do we do now? We're not done. And he's looking for a ride back. I said, well, we'll stay over. He says, stay over where? I said, they'll put us up right here. What do you mean right here? We're on the perimeter practically, which is what the right here was. In fact, at St. N, that's where you were always right on the perimeter. Our little club that we had, that's another separate story, was right on the perimeter. And then in any case, So we stayed. In the meantime, the guys had told him all these stories. Didn't we get hit that night? Well, he didn't get shot, that hopefully, you know what I mean. But the next day, I never saw anybody type so fast on a mechanical typewriter. So now we're going to go back. And the way you went back is you went down to the airport, found somebody that was going your direction, and said, hey, can we hitch a ride? Sure, why not? Well, I put him on a slick, and a slick was where you didn't have seats and so forth. You got to distract yourself in. What he didn't know that I knew was that the slick was a gunship, which meant that on the way back, we'd go down and make some runs and shoot guns at people and get shot back at and so forth. But I told him to be sure and get your camera so you can take pictures. So we went back on the gunship and got into the aerial war a little bit and shot at people, and people shot back. And we got back, and then he went into the legal section, and nobody would ever go anywhere with me from the legal section after that.
They just knew better, right?
And he had all the war stories to tell, and the other guys didn't.
Very good.
You know.
Were there any people that you remember best from your time in the military, and if so, why? I'm sure there's quite a few.
Oh God.
Maybe
Well,
a couple stories would be nice.
well, yeah, I mean, you had individuals, and unfortunately, I don't remember all the names, but I was constantly in units that were doing, shall we say, more than they were authorized to do or expected to do, or let me put it this way, expected to do a whole bunch of things that they shouldn't have had to do. How's that? You know what I mean? The two that I just cited in Vietnam were perfect examples of that. There was, from the standpoint of the depot unit, you know, where I was doing all of the not doing gradation, but the personal effects and so forth, you know what I mean? We weren't designed for that. We just got a bunch of people and we had to put it together and do it. One of the first things I had to do was completely revamp how they received the items and so forth, so that you had separate people. In other words, they would come in and you'd have a guy that had inventory them. They would be turning them over to us, and we'd have a guy and an officer that would inventory the stuff coming in. Then it would go into temporary storage, so that when we got everything, you tried to have it be a minimum number of shipments to the next of kin. We might send the things that were recovered from the body home, and then advise that as we recovered the other things, we would send them. But we tried to get them all together at one time. And you had to have an officer that interviewed that stuff, because he signed off as a summary court officer on the thing and so forth. I didn't have to sign it, he could sign that. But you needed more of them than me, because I couldn't supervise every particular thing all the time. And for example, I had the warrant officer that worked with me there. We got people that were sticking their nose into what we were doing all the time, trying to get control of us, especially with the power that we had. They loved that. They wanted to get control of us. But we didn't belong to them. The only one I answered to was Westmoreland. And he would write letters to next of kin, and I'd write the letter for him, and then he would readjust it, because he'd say, well, I'm sorry about your kid, but he was doing his job, you know. And that's what happens when you do that job.
Right.
You know, he was not a politician, let's put it that way.
So you worked with General Westmoreland quite often during your
Not that often.
years?
No.
Okay.
One of the things I had to do with Westmoreland you'd love this. They had a report of the way that the enemy dead were being handled.
You mean being counted or physically handled?
Well, what we did with them, we weren't treating them very nicely or something like that. So a good friend of mine was pretty close to Westmoreland. He said, Bob, you ought to go with me on this. I said, okay, I'll go with you, I don't care. So, so we went to every division savate, every division level unit in Vietnam to see how they handled deceased personnel. The first one didn't know we were coming, so that way they weren't prepared for us. And so we wrote up a pretty good thing with them. Because one of the ways that deceased personnel got handled is you pile them up in the local area where they came from and advised everybody there that, okay, here they were and they were deceased personnel and they belonged to the families in the area. But the families didn't want to claim them because then our guys could see which family came and, you know, which family was supporting the VC. Wow. So what would happen in many cases is the bodies would get piled up, they'd pour kerosene all over them and set them on fire. That was how they got handled. But we couldn't tell people that.
Wow.
So we had to say, well, they piled them up so that the families could come and reclaim the bodies and so forth. And that's what we put in the official report that went back. But we got to know them all, and they got to know me from the standpoint I didn't. And it helped me from the standpoint of where they would then send the stuff to me, and so forth. And I explained to them about the inventory process and what we had to do with that and so forth. But I got to visit every divisional unit in Vietnam. And I said a few minutes ago how guys were there and never got to go out and see anybody because they'd be at a base camp. That would be it. That would be their total experience in Vietnam.
Right, and yet you were in
I was all
every
over.
province, as you said.
I was everywhere.
Yeah.
And in many cases I drove, you know, up and down the road. Like our unit that we had from the Philippines, they were civil engineering type unit. They made roads.
Right.
And you can't imagine the amount of roads they put in and so forth, like that. And we supported them with everything you can imagine and so forth. Because we had to arrange for them to be supported with things like blacktop and all like that. Engineering supplies and so forth. So we had to coordinate that, the whole 9 yards. But that's what I meant about the units. To identify what they did and what they would have been designed to do, two different things totally, because you got involved in the things that you've never expected to be involved with. All right, quick true story. The last company that I had while I was at Chain Inn, the Chinese commander said, Bob, look, I know you've done this, and you've been to 3 and so forth. We're starting to get guys in where they can replace you at the 3 level. I want you to take this company for me. Why do you want me to take that company? He said, because you've got the experience, and I don't have anybody with experience. I said, look, you got a whole bunch of captains that need the combat time commanding it. He said, I'll give it to them later. You know what I mean? So he gave me the company. Great. So again, I've got lieutenants that were relatively inexperienced and so forth, and I had a high VD rate in the company. Why? The things that the company did, they would go out and do them with the units in the area. So they go out to see this combat unit, they go out to see that combat unit, and so forth. Well, en route, if they could partake of any, shall we say, normal away from post-recreational activities, such as finding a young lady that was willing, they would. They'd find the gal that was, shall we say, clean and didn't have any little extra diseases or anything that was willing? No, they just found the one that was available. So we had the high VD rate. We also had a little club that we set up, which had sort of gone to hell. So I got a couple of my good sergeants and I said, we're going to clean the club up. Okay. So that meant first thing we did is we took a fire hose to the club and literally cleaned it up. The second thing we did is we kicked everybody out of the club, all right? And then anybody that would have been able to go to the club later on after we ramped it would be physically cured. They wouldn't have VD, all right? And then along with that, I had to revise where we got things for the club because before I got there, that we had like a lieutenant that would go into like Hong Kong or Shanghai or something like that and spend US dollars there buying stuff for the club, which was totally illegal. You could not do that. You got spending US dollars in those Chinese controlled areas. That was frowned upon, to say the least. Aside from that, they court-martialed.
Wow.
You know, so we stopped doing that, but we had all sorts of things we were available. We did all right. Such as we had a continuous supply of beer, not only from our normal sources, but the Filipinos would get the San Rafael beer and bring that in, which was a real good beer, so we had that. And we could swap with people for stuff. Special Forces guys loved us, and we loved them. But not only did I go to Cambodia with them, but I was good buddies with them because I had stuff they couldn't get. He had stuff I couldn't get. The engineers had stuff I couldn't get. I got stuff they couldn't get. So I established improved barracks for all the troops and so forth. We lived better that way and so forth. In any case, I don't remember what I'm going to tell you now.
Well, what can you tell me about General Don Starry?
Oh,
As someone that you remember from your time.
he was a TRADOC. That's later on.
Oh, okay.
Don Starry was the commander at TRADOC, and I was in the Doctrine shop at TRADOC.
Okay. When did you work at TRADOC? What were the years?
Okay, after I came back from Vietnam.
Yeah.
Okay. Among other things, I was at the quartermaster's school. I was sent to the quartermaster at Fort Lee to be an IG. But I knew too many things about Fort Lee, so the commanding general taught me how to be an IG, and they put me in the school as an instructor at the higher level. I said, well, why don't you give me one of the training battalions? No, Bob, we want you in here. And I found out later on why. The reason was, we taught the advanced course, which was to majors and colonels. I mean, majors and captains. We had majors and captains that had never had experience as a company commander. I'd get up and tell them about a morning report, and they didn't know what I was talking about, and I'm going right out of my mind. Good Lord, how did you ever become a major or a captain, you know? Morning report is a standard report going in every day from every company-sized unit that states the conditions of the unit, to include any problems they might have, like how's your equipment, and like anybody that's gone, like they don't know where they are, anybody that's AWOL and so forth. In other words, we're authorized 200 people, we've only got 192. We've got 8 that aren't accounted for, or something like that. You don't like that on a morning report. That's
right.
Yeah, okay. At any rate, so at any rate, I was teaching at that level, and I was and so forth. I was writing logistics at the level where I told you before how maybe I didn't tell you that, but I wrote what was required to be a logistician in the Army. I didn't write that you should be a colonel, but later on, to be a logistician, you had to be a full colonel. That was the level the MOS logistician was written for, was colonel, all right? But I did write the requirements that you had to have. You had to have experience in more than one logistics area. You had to have experience with allies, you had joint experience and so forth. But I had it all. I not only had it all, but I had it in combat. A time in combat counts double the same time counts in just normal operation. So if you do it for a year in combat, it's equivalent to 2 years any place up, and so forth. Plus all the different problems you run up against, and so forth. Okay, so after I was there, then I spent some time at where I went back into a reserve status for a while. And my reserve status was very interesting from the standpoint of two things. The one thing that I did as a civilian was I was in the controller business at Fort Lee, which taught me which is a whole new aspect that I didn't have from the civilian, from the military side. And okay, what did I do with the controller? I worked in what they call the military MAD. I'll remember what it stood for in a second. But I worked directly for the commanding general. That's how he knew me so well. I worked directly for the commanding general, where he had problems that would involve more than one of the people that worked under him. In other words, if he had a problem that involved, say, the commissary and a unit that was supported through the commissary, I could get put into that problem because I was totally neutral. And I would write up solutions to the problem. And then I could impose the solution on the guys, because the commanding general, that's who I worked for. And I also looked for ways to save money for the Army, how to operate more efficiently. So that was our basic thing that we were written on. A fun thing that happened is, among other things, we were responsible for education for both the military and civilians that were stationed at Fort Lee. Anytime they were going to go into a supervisory level. In other words, if somebody who were going to be promoted as a civilian where he'd be over other civilians, or be promoted in a position where it would be the military, and this would be for his first supervisory thing where he'd be over guys and so forth. We taught them how to be a supervisor and so forth. Now I found this very interesting. For example, even the civilians, I'd go to talk to them, and if you know anything about unions and so forth, they didn't even know what a shop steward was. And at any rate, if you talk to anybody that's had anything to do with a union, they'll know what a shop steward is. At any rate, I did that there, but I got involved in all sorts of things where I could come up with improvements. Two things that I did. We had two sub-posts under us at Fort Lee. One was AP Hill and the other was Fort Pickett. AP Hill and Fort Pickett's primary job was to provide a site for operational in-the-field training for both the Guard and the Reserves on an annual basis, plus the same thing for units in the active Army that came in to do that. All right. Great. When they supported them, they would come in and they'd go right to the field. They did not have, they had their own mess facilities and so forth. What they didn't have was ice. So what we did was we would buy big commercial chunks of ice and give them to the units. What happened was our sources of the ice were restricted to one source, because the vet who had to support the ice from the standpoint of sanitary content had disallowed this one and this one and this one. We went from 4 to 1. So I said, okay, this is nonsense. So what I did is I determined from the Army that they had a program where if you got the money and you could amortize the improvement, within 12 months, we'd give you the money. Graham, I love that program. So I grabbed that program. I bought ice machines to locate at AP Hill and Pickett for all the units that would come in anytime and so forth. I determined how many they needed and doubled it. So they always had enough to do the job. And so if some of them broke down, they get them fixed, but in the meantime, they had enough to do the job. I located them at Fort Lee at all of the mess facilities at Fort Lee. They got them too. Now, what did this do? It made their ice became readily available. They had twice the capability they needed. So anybody doing a party at home went in and just filled up some bags and brought the ice home. So everybody loved you that way. You know what our total cost was? The biggest thing? The bags they put the ice in.
Okay. Right.
The biggest problem I had was with the engineers. Why? Oh, we weren't programmed to put that stuff in. And they weren't going to do it for another 6 months, which would shoot my year requirement all to hell. So the old man had a staff meeting, and I brought that up at the staff meeting. And guess what? The next day, the engineers changed their priority, and my stuff all got installed. And the cost was amortized in less than 6 months.
Well, that's good.
So I liked that program, so I found another one. They were using the IBM 36040s for all of the reports that reported. These are spending reports, contract reports, anything like that. And they produced these big sheets of paper about this, where everybody got them and they stacked up on their desks like this, so forth. So what did I do? I bought microfiche equipment where you could make the fish. And I gave them readers. So now they could read, here's the reader, they could read the fish that came every day. They'd get a little thing like this instead of big things like that. We could eventually put all of the things that were in storage on the fish, and we could get all that stuff come out of the old World War II buildings where it had been put, where the weight was breaking the buildings down.
Wow.
And
That's
so
pretty good.
forth. And the cost on that one was like this. Now, I didn't get credit for that because the little gal that did the records thing for Fort Lee and so forth was a good, tireless gal that could never get anybody to do anything about her problems. And I said, okay. And her name was Thompson. And I said, okay, Ann Thompson. I said, Ann, this is it. I've written it up. I'm going to help you write it up. And you put it in, so you put it in as a suggestion. And I'll support it because I'm the one that approves the suggestions. You write it up and submit it, I'll approve it. So she saved the Army all that money, and she got promoted down at Morton Monroe in doing records and so forth from Monroe and all of the posts throughout the United States Army.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, well, but she knew how to do those little things, so she could go out and do the same thing.
Sure.
At any
So
rate,
why don't we go?
I'm sorry. but-
Why don't we go back to the start of the story? How long were you in the National Guard? You
2
said.
years.
I'm sorry.
2 years.
3 years?
2.
Oh, 2 years. Okay.
Well, what happened is, I went to college out in Chicago, so I
Okay.
couldn't be at drills. So they discharged me because I wasn't able to attend.
Okay.
You know.
And you joined in 1947,
Yeah. So I was a 49.
47 to 49 with the
Right.
National Guard. Right.
Then 1950, 51 was when I went back on active duty, regular Army.
Okay. Right.
51, I went back on active duty in the regular Army. And the way that happened is they were going to draft me, because I wasn't in college at the time. And I saw what they were going to do, draft me into the Marine Corps. So I went out first, found the first soldier suit I could find. I knew what they did. And joined the Army. And in the Guard, I was in the headquarters, 2nd Battalion, 105th Infantry, 27th Division, New York National Guard. And I was one of the radio operators for the old man battalion.
Okay.
You know, I did communications. We did all the field communications, telephone, radios, everything.
Where were you stationed?
Oh, stationed right out of Schenectady.
Okay.
We never went. Oh, we went up. It was Pine Camp. That's where we had every year for. It's Fort Drum today. It's Pine Camp then.
Right.
We went up to Pine Camp for our 2 weeks every year, which was interesting because I was one of the few people that I served with in the Army later on that even knew what a troop train was, and we went to Pine Camp on troop training. That's how you went.
Oh, very good.
And my logistics experience even helped me there because I was with a bunch of guys that we created our own logistics, and we had our own supply of beer on the troop train, and we started to run out, and we got stopped because our priority was below everything. So we stopped, and over there at a place that sold beer, so 4 of us went running over there, and we got a whole bunch of beer. We were carrying like 4 cases of beer back each, and another train got between our train and us, and fortunately, our sergeant saw that it was critical that we get back because we had all the beer. So he managed to keep our train stalled long enough so we could get back and put it in on the ice stuff that we had there and so forth. and I was commended very highly for maintaining the supply for the troops to have as we went down.
That is critical. That's true.
Now, among other things, okay, and then I went back on active duty, of course.
Okay, so after the Korean War time period, 1953, were you in the military for the rest of the 1950s?
Well, I was, okay, okay, Korean War, yeah, but I've got to figure it, okay, from the Korean War,
Yeah.
when I came off, the reserves put me in a logistics unit. I didn't have any armored units that I could get in, so I went into the reserves there. But I still did things in an armored manner.
Right.
In other words, if I got into, for example, we had a supply and service battalion in Schenectady.
And what's that? What is the splash?
That was in Schenectady. This is what, after I had been on active duty, I wasn't in the Guard anymore.
Right.
The Guard wanted to get me back, and the Guards were going to put me in a alert battalion, long range patrol battalion, unit rather, alert battalion, long range patrol unit, because I had the recon experience, I had the armored experience and so forth, but no. The only vacancies that they had, because let me put it this way, I looked at the Guard, and I knew everybody in the Guard, and I saw the same people in all the hierarchy units, and I said, Bob, you're never going to get promoted. So I stayed in the reserve as opposed to going into the Guard. And in the Guard, I got back into logistics again, and so forth. But showing how it equated. The things I was doing there, for example, I got into the 80th Division, and in the 80th Division, we had a unit that tied in very closely to what I'd been doing. And we were the guys that gave the equivalent of Army training tests to units in the Guard, Reserve, and Active Army. And the Army training test was the way you determined the readiness of the unit. You went in and you put them through an exercise, and you determined their training level. Is everybody where they should be? Are they doing the right jobs and so forth? Their supply level, is their supply, is their equipment operational? Have they taken all of the steps to make it operational and so forth? Well, while I was in my previous reserve thing. I became the 4 of a battalion there with units doing everything in the world. And they called a little thing, what it was a military maintenance management test that they gave to the unit. Or in other words, they inspected them for material maintenance management. In other words, if you had equipment that was not operational, had you done what you should do to make it operational, or anything like that? In other words, what had you done to keep your unit ready to go? All right? So I determined that, and so forth, and as an aside, what you might find interesting, I went to all of the companies in our battalion, which we had 7 of them, and they were all different kinds of companies. And I went to the companies and I said, "Hi guys, this is Bob. This is the test that's coming down, all right?" And I told them what it was all about and how important it was and so forth. All right. When I went back, I wrote a directive letter to them stating what they had to do and that I expected them to do it and so forth. All right. I signed it Bob Whitman. Now I had experience doing that because I had to write to the commanding generals of the division in Vietnam where they hadn't done with the thing, and it was a letter that was dictated to me by Westmoreland where I signed that Bob Whitman, captain, writing to a 2-star general. Right? And so forth. And I didn't sign it for the commander, I signed it Bob Whitman. So that's why they put me at St. Anne. But in any case, make a long story short, we were the only reserve unit in the United States Army that passed the command maintenance management exam the first time, and in the active Army you only had about maybe 10% of the units that passed it the first time.
Wow.
I'm talking units in the Guard and the Army Reserve. We were the only one in the United States Army that passed it the first time. And our advisor, who was Lieutenant Colonel, called me in. He said, "Bob, I see you took command of the battalion." I said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I'm the 4, I didn't take command of anything." He said, "Did you write this to the company commanders?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Did you see how you signed it?" I said, "I signed it Bob Whitman." "I don't see a "for the commander" line on there." "Oh, I forgot that." He said, "Did everybody do it?" "Yes." "Did they know you?" "Yes." "Did they figure that out?" I said, "Yeah, and I knew I'd boot them in the ass unless they did it." So we did.
Wow. That's good. What unit were you in during the Cuban Missile Crisis?
I was in the 413th Supply and Service Battalion.
410th.
413th was a specialized reserve component unit that got twice as many drills and twice as many everything. Our supply went in at a very high priority. In other words, if we needed it, we got it. We didn't have to worry about it, and so forth. We were on orders where if they called us on the phone, we went to war. And when they
called us on the phone, what?
That was said go.
Oh, go.
When the Cuban missile thing cranked up, we'd gone. We were on the road. Nobody knew we left. Our families didn't even know. And we were going down. We were going to deploy to Cuba.
So you were going from New York to Florida?
We were going from New York to Florida.
Right. Okay. By truck, by caravan.
Yeah, we had everything. We were mobile. We put what we'd done in the unit. Among other things, I got in with the where things became surplus, and we had acquired from the United States Navy a whole bunch of radios and all the frames that went on the radios for our unit. So what did we do? On all of our vehicles, we used the frames, and anything that went with the unit, where that vehicle would be used in the unit, had everything that went with the unit that it needed to go with the unit on the frames. So all they had to do was crank the truck up, and everything they needed was right there, and they took it with them.
Okay. So did you get to Florida in the middle of the crisis?
We were en route, we never got there.
Oh, I see. Okay.
The crisis was over real quick. We had like 3 days to get to Florida. And by the second day, they got a hold of us and said, "Come on back."
Okay.
But as far as the family was concerned and so forth, or anybody went, they thought we were just gone out on an exercise someplace or something.
Are there any last stories you would like to share with us about your military service?
Oh,
Anything
my
you
God.
might not? Just
I didn't tell you what I did at Trade Act, yeah.
okay. Yeah. Give me a summary of trade out. Maybe a story.
Well, I went back on active duty in Trade Act, in the Doctrine shop.
And when was this? What years?
This was in 1977.
Okay. And you were a trade doc for how many years?
Until 1984, well, until 81.
Okay.
I was there 4 years, and then I went up to Fort Devon, and then, where I was in the unit that I mentioned before, where they worked with all of the Guard and Reserve units, the 7th State area, and so forth. And we could control the Reserve units. We couldn't control the Guard units because they were for the states. They all belonged to the states. You know, their command line went to the governor.
Okay.
You know,
Now,
so unless they were activated, they weren't in our command line.
okay. Would you tell us what TRADOC stands for?
Training and Doctrine Command.
Okay. Very good.
Okay, they have all the training capability in the Army, and the Doctrine side told the Army how it would be trained, equipped, manned, you name it, right across the board. Okay, and the manual that tells them that is 105. And we rewrote that manual. And to give you an idea of the level of the manual, there was a fellow named Paul Cavanaugh who wound up as a general, and me, that we were both in the Doctrine shop. And I was a colonel by then. And we were both scheduled to go to the War College. Great. And they came in one day and said, "Oh, by the way, you're not going to the War College." And we said, "Why not?" And they said, "Well, what you're writing is what we teach." In other words, what we were writing for 100-5 was the curriculum for the War College. Which I had problems with, because I thought in terms of what was going to happen in 10 years and more when I went up and I was working with the Reserve and Guard units, and I had to shift gears because those units hadn't changed. They were still where I knew this was going to happen to them and that was going to happen to them. And it wasn't necessarily knowledge that everybody had.
Okay. What unit were you assigned to when you worked at TRADOC, or did
I
that
was
change?
assigned to the Doctrine shop.
Okay.
It was the Deputy Chief of Staff for Doctrine, period. We had a total of 7 of us.
Okay.
And we originally were under combat development. And John Starry came in and said, "That's ridiculous," because we worked for a 2-star in combat development. He said, "You guys work for me." Boom. From then on, we were directly under the 4-star. He'd come in and send somebody out, like, normally it would be like a colonel. I was a colonel. He'd send me out to go to a meeting representing him. That meant when I walked into the meeting, I'd sit like this at the table, and all the generals at the table would sit around like that. And I knew what the old man wanted, so they go, blah, 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 and I say, "No, we're not going to do that." "Oh, okay." And they go, blah, 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 and then I say, "No, we're not going to do that." I went to a meeting on the tip fiddle, which is time-phased deployment list, where you determine what you're going to, like we were still talking, going to war in Europe and so forth. Time-phased deployment list would be what units, in the event that Russia came in, what units went when, what other things that went, and so forth. Well, I was talking with a bunch of AG types, and they were very interested in post offices going over. So they were all concerned about the morale of the troops, and you gotta get postage, you gotta get this and like that. I said, let's do it electronically. I said, we're not gonna send any post offices, and besides, the ones we've got there now can handle the traffic. But you're not gonna have mail going over. What are you talking about, Bob? We gotta get the mail there. Blah, 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 blah. I said, have any of you ever been in a post office? Well, no. I said, go to a post office and go and see how many tonnages are involved in going anywhere. Now, the tonnage capability that you've got early in the war all does this. It gets in an airplane, does this, and like this, and comes back down. The Navy won't give you a sea route for an absolute minimum of 6 months. Well, how do you know that? I said, because we talked to the Navy. and all like that. Now, other interesting things that we did. We wrote the Airland Battle while I was there. They didn't have any doctrine for airland battle. The Air Force thought they went down to 3,000 feet and they could supply close air support at 3,000 feet. I was in the old Army where we did the control of airstrikes from the ground. In the new Army, which was we were in at this time, the Air Force would put guys out there to control strikes. It was a totally different environment. So forth. I knew more about bringing a combat strike in on the troops than the guys from TRADOC, than the guys at Langley, which was where the fighter guys were, and so forth in the Air Force. Because I'd done it. You know, you had to be completely aware of what it looked like on the ground, so you could translate that to the guy in the fighter plane or fighter plane that was coming in to support you,
Right.
and so forth, like that. Which was a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, I can
And
imagine.
then, well, there were a whole bunch of things that we did like that, because we were writing the whole thing. For example, low-intensity conflict. We did not have doctrine for low-intensity conflict. Low-intensity conflict is anything up to using nukes. If you're not using nukes, it's low-intensity conflict.
Okay.
So what we did, I was the ops officer for that, for low-intensity conflict. And I got with Colonel, wait a minute. The colonel that went into Vietnam to rescue our guys that were in a prison camp there, and then they weren't there when they got there.
Hackworth?
Yes, no, not Hackworth.
No.
Same thing, same type guy as Hackworth.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Hack.
Beckwith?
Yes.
I'm
And-
trying to remember that
and-
name too.
Beckwith was down at Fort Bragg and so forth.
Oh, okay.
And he and me did this. And of course, I was not welcome at Fort Bragg because I was a leg, I was a tanker. I didn't jump out of airplane. That's a separate story, I'll tell you real quick.
Yeah, we're running out of tape, but.
Oh, well. You want to know different things I did.
Oh, I know. Yes, we could.
I had
This
the
is
riggers.
wonderful.
I had the riggers that were with me in Vietnam. They belonged to me, and the riggers were going to get me to jump with the South Vietnamese, so I get their wings, and I'd get our wings. See, I'd be jump qualified.
Oh, what armored cav unit were you in, and were you in the same unit for the entire time you were in the armored cav?
Well,
Or did it change according to
they changed
your career?
accordingly, yeah.
Okay.
In other words, well, I can forget where I was now. Most of my armored CAD stuff was done, in other words, for example, what I did when I was writing Doctrine and so forth
Yeah.
was Doctrine that included all of the armored CAD units and so forth. But my armored CAD unit was the 6th Armored CAD, right, I mean, the 6th Regiment, armored regiment, you know what I mean? And that was armored CAD.
Right. Yes, the way it
But
was.
that was that was your 6th, not 6th, 9th Regiment. I'm sorry, I'm saying 6th. I don't mean 6th. I mean 9th. They were the 9th Cavalry Regiment, and they became armored CAD when you brought tanks in, because they were still a cavalry regiment, but you did it with tanks, not with horses. All right. When I went into the unit, I was one of the first white guys assigned to the unit. So I was still, because the unit was a black unit, you know what I mean? And they got the nickname,
You said they were the Buffalo Soldiers.
Buffalo Soldiers,
Yeah.
right. And so I became Buffalo Soldier.
Okay.
And like that. And that was my primary armored cab experience right there.
Okay.
With the armored cab, with the 9th Regiment, so forth. But I got involved with them all indirectly and all sorts of things.
Okay.
And when I was doing the low intensity conflict, I got involved with everybody that would be that. For example, our primary low intensity unit in the rear areas that we had in the Army was MPs. They were the only ones back there with the mobility and so forth and like that.
Yeah.
So if you could beef up the MPs and give them more capability, and I'll tell you a quick true story on that, and like that. So among other things, one of the things that came about was what you could call a grenade launcher. You crank that thing up and you could throw grenades like you would do with a machine gun and so forth. And at Fort McClellan was the primary training for MPs. Commanding General at Fort McClellan, who commanded the MP school there and so forth, was a girl general, a female general. So she was very conscious of MPs being employed, women being employed in the MPs and so forth. So among other things, one of the weapons we came up with impacted directly on our rear area development was this grenade launcher, because you can give it to the MPs and put it on jeeps or equivalent things, which were replaced by remember the name, all the later on equipment that replaced the jeeps and so forth, you know.
Okay, yeah. The Humvees?
Humvees, yeah.
Humvees, okay.
All the Humvees, which became a general purpose unit for everything like that. So we had a demonstration for all the hierarchies and so forth, and they selected a very attractive young MP gal who was very proficient and so forth, but not necessarily a great big muscular MP gal, right? And she had the weapon, she was going to show the weapon. There was only one problem, she couldn't arm the weapon. It took too much arm strength to do this. So one of the other MPs got there and armed it for her, but it became a condition. If you're going to use that, you've got to make sure you got people who can arm it.
Right.
And so forth. But now,
Well,
before our rear area operations came in, we wrote things like what would be called a RAOC. That's a Rear Area Operations Center, which would be set up in the rear area to coordinate cross-member support and so forth in the rear area. Because prior to that, all of your rear area protection was done by the units in the rear area. And if you read their mission, it would say this unit does this and this and this. In addition, it provides its own self-defense. Which meant if you had a support unit there, you got a maintenance battalion, okay? Now, yes, they had individual weapons and so forth. They might even have some equipment they'd be working on. But they had to stop doing maintenance work to provide their own defense. And it was not necessarily the most effective defense that you had against Russian units. Russians had big helicopters. We didn't have the big helicopters the Russians had. The Russians could bring combat-ready battalions and equipment in with their helicopters. So they've got combat battalions coming in with light armor at that level being dropped into our rear areas. What do we have to stop them? Nothing. Made interesting situation. So we wrote up all sorts of doctrines for that. Unfortunately, we did this in the early 70s. By the time we started going into where we are today and all the related things like that, they didn't read what we wrote. And anybody that would listen to me at the time, because I was retired by then, I said, read the manuals, you're not following the doctrine. Oh, Bob, what do you know about it? And I'm going, oh, God. I said, you're going to get people killed. And they did. Because we had the equivalent in Vietnam where they put out things on the convoy routes and blow people up and so forth.
Right.
Art, go ahead.
Well, Mr. Whitman, I want to thank you for your time. We've had 2 hours of really interesting stories.
Oh,
You shared a lot of very
I knew I could
interesting
keep going.
stories.
That's all right.
Oh, no. I wish we could do it all day. It would be wonderful, but thank you so much.